Dead Space, the remake, is a good game, but it is quite lacking in my opinion. The story was great. I give that a solid 9 out of 10. It had a lot of twists and turns. I was genuinely interested in finding out what was going on. There was some very cliche bits where you'd walk into a room and the person would still be alive after all of this time and then just spontaneously die for one reason or another, and it seemed to do that over and over again, which I guess is more of a joke from the developers rather than, you know, actually intentional story design. Yeah, it was a really interesting story. It was a really interesting plot, and you were learning stuff all the way through. There was no huge exposition dumps. There was quite a big one near the end, but it wasn't massive. It didn't really interrupt gameplay. So on the whole, the story was great. In terms of glitches and bugs, until the very last battle, there weren't any, really. We had one crash. I was playing the PC version, and it seemed to be a graphics driver issue was the error it gave me, although everything was up to date. But other than that, it ran really smoothly. It ran nicely. I didn't get frames drops or anything like that. So, yeah, solid on that one. The only thing I would say is that the engine, whatever engine it was using, was perhaps not great, because you would occasionally get stuck on invisible walls or caught in places which you seemed like you shouldn't really have done, and that was very apparent when you were getting into battle. So before we get to combat, I'm going to talk about mechanics, which I think were a little bit lacking. See, the story was great, but in order to tell a long story in the same place in a confinement of a ship, which was obviously a very linear story with some detours you could go on, little side quests if you wanted to, there was way too much repetition, way too much of going down the same corridors, way too much going to get this key card to open these doors, put the electricity box in the electricity point, switch these levers, do this, do that, and it was just the same over and over again. And because it's a horror style game, the slow gameplay and the slow action of the game really sort of drove home how repetitive they were, and they did get towards the latter part of the game pretty tedious. There were some really interesting mechanics that it threw in from time to time, but in general it was very much do the same thing again. It just felt like a whole bunch of fetch quests, which I guess is okay if everything else is good. And like I say, it had a great story, but the combat, I think, from my perspective, wasn't great either. But again, before we get to that, still on the mechanics, the slow gameplay was one thing. The horror, it was fantastic at the start, but it fizzled out so quickly. Within an hour and a half, there was just absolutely no horror side to it at all. They were using the same monsters, the same jump scares, the same mechanics to try and scare you, the same music beats, and it became really predictable when things were going to happen, what type of monsters were there, and it was a shame, because this is touted as a sci-fi horror, and I really feel like it could have just pushed that horror thing to one side and put in some more sort of fast-paced parts, make it a bit more of an action game, and I think it would have served a lot better for that. Now, I know this was a remake of an original, and there's only so much artistic license you can throw at it if you're trying to be, you know, good to the original work, but I really do think this would have been better touted as an action game rather than a horror. Like Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal is technically a horror game, but it's so fast-paced, it's got so much action, you never, ever, ever get bored in that. And yeah, okay, it's not as long a story, it doesn't take as long to play through, it's not giving you as much information as this one, but it's exciting. And there was literally no excitement in this apart from the very beginning when you were like, I didn't know anything about Dead Space. I'd not seen the original. I didn't look at it. I didn't read anything. I didn't watch any videos. So I didn't even know there was going to be aliens in it. I didn't even know it was going to be a horror. So turning it on for the first time and playing it, I was like, oh, okay. And that, it got me. But then it went away. Carrying on with the mechanics for a minute, the scaling of giving you weapons and the credit system and the shops just felt off to me. It was nice that throughout the entire game you did seem to be slowly getting stronger and better, but it seemed to give you the weapons way too fast, but then give you no real way to upgrade them all or deal with them all or get to use them or get used to them, because there was never any ammo. There was always an ammo shortage, which again plays into the horror, the slow gameplay and the lack of ammo and the how do I deal with this. And it obviously wanted to use environmental features like throwing things at enemies and using the environment to deal with things. but it didn't work for me. I feel like it should have given you the weapons more slowly throughout the game, but giving you more opportunity to actually upgrade each one and get to know it and get good with it. And for me, the weapon you get at the very start, because that's the one I poured in my first few upgrades into, that was my favorite one by the end of the game. Sure, there are some bigger weapons that do more damage, but that one seemed to just work best at killing the monsters. And considering the monsters really didn't develop all that much from the very beginning, yeah, it just seemed like the best one to me. So if I'd have just had ammo for that one the whole way through the game, I probably would never have used any of the other weapons, which is a bit of a shame. So in terms of upgrades and things like that, one of the other frustrations, I guess, it's not really a frustration, but more of a recommendation, I think, would be that there's a lot of collectibles. You're constantly opening lockers to try and find med kits or ammo or credits or unlock tokens or upgrade tokens, whatever they were called. And that's fine, but 14 and a half hours in, again, the tedium of doing the same thing over and over again just to get a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it never really felt like you were getting anything of high value. And I just feel like that if they'd have given you more credits but left less often, or more ammo but maybe less often, so there weren't so many lockers, there weren't so many chests to open, then it's great. And I feel like that imbalance was there in the game from the point where the developers were literally giving you other items that you could sell to the shop that were more and more valuable as you went through because you needed more and more money, which to me suggests that the credit scaling system just doesn't work. And then right at the end, it bulk gives you an absolute ton of money, a load of upgrade stuff, and it's like, here you go, here's all the stuff you possibly wanted 5 minutes before the end. And as a result, you never get a chance to actually get to use any of the other guns or get to know them, get the feel for them, and actually put any upgrades into them. And a lot of that comes down to the game mode I was playing on, which was the story mode rather than medium or hard or easy, which I don't think was a good move to do. However, for the sake of making a YouTube series, I think it was the only move I could have done for me personally, because I'm not a confident gamer. I don't have the dexterity to just aim at things and one hit kill them. I'm very clumsy with the control. And that's another area where I think this falls down, is the auto-aim. So it's generous enough in the menus to give you an auto-aim facility, which I added on, but it didn't do anything. It was useless. Auto-aim to me, and in all the other games I've played, is if you're in the general vicinity of an enemy and you hold left trigger to sort of zoom in or like lock in your aim, then it actually aims at it. In this game, you actually already have to be pointing at that enemy for it to then lock onto that enemy, which is great, but it's also useless if you're, like I am, struggling with some of the enemies in this game were tiny, and particularly the final boss battle, there were some really specific points on that you had to hit, and I'm just fumbling around with the analog sticks trying to point in the general direction, and the auto-aim was just literally doing nothing. So I might as well not have had that turned on, because I really don't think it gave me any benefit at all. I think my other complaints about the mechanics were that there was no jump, no dash, no getting out of the way of trouble. It was very locked in and linear. And yes, it's a linear game, and yes, all of those things are in there to really emphasize the horror aspect of this. But there were sections where you just felt like, I just want to run through this quickly. I just want to deal with this. I want to dodge out of the way of this thing. And there was no doing that. Again, the final battle and a couple of the battles where you were fighting these big things with tentacles, there was no way of dodging out of the way of these attacks, which if I hadn't been playing in story mode, I think I would have had to do those again and again and again and again. And like everything in this game, nothing's quick. If you're doing something relatively quick, a quick battle, and you have to repeat it a few times, great, that's not a problem. You can do that. But when it's going on for a while and you're having to constantly repeat it, I don't find that entertaining personally as a gamer or somebody that's trying to enjoy playing a game. So that does bring us on to the combat, which I think is even worse than the mechanics. The combat, for me, the problem was the difficulty scaling, which was ridiculous. So I started the game accidentally in medium difficulty. So I think there's 6 difficulty settings. There's story, easy, something else, then medium, then something else, then hard. And I was accidentally on medium, and it was very difficult right at the beginning, as you would expect, to do any damage to the aliens at all, and they could just one-hit you, which I think is, for a medium setting, too much. I think if that's the default setting, it's going to throw you into the game. I don't think it should just be one-hit killing you as soon as you get in. But again, that's probably leaning into the idea that the developers of this game want you to feel like this is hard. You're in a difficult situation. The aliens have taken over the ship and you're all on your own. There's nothing you can do. But there are ways of doing that without just going, oh, you're going to have to be really careful because every time an alien touches you or throws some spit at you, you're going to die. So knocking it down to story just was the total opposite. So it's only 2 difficulty settings down, and all of a sudden, you're not taking any damage at all, and you're one-shotting these aliens with the weakest gun with no upgrades from early on. So going into story mode made the entire upgrade path and the arc of all of the weapons and the armor totally pointless. Like, I really wanted to feel like I was progressing with myself throughout the game when I was upgrading my armor and upgrading my weapons and pouring the money and the time into collecting the things to do that. But on the story mode, it just was pointless. It didn't do anything. It didn't make any difference. I was just invulnerable. Like the last boss fight, I was just totally invulnerable. All of its attacks it was doing were doing absolutely no damage to me at all, which you could say, well, you know, you could have knocked it up a little bit. And halfway through the Let's Play, I did knock it up to easy. And the difference in story and easy, one leg up, was just ridiculous. It was, it was just such a massive leap. So to the point where it just had no ammo, constantly had no ammo, because the enemies just took a little bit more ammo to kill, and because I'm not as accurate as a lot of people, I was missing a lot, so I was wasting a lot of ammo. So it just felt like the scaling was off. I feel like the medium setting would have been better off higher up, and there should have been a much sort of gradual gap between story and easy. And I think realistically, if I was playing this on my own, if I wasn't making the YouTube series on it, and I wasn't just trying to complete it as quickly as possible so that I can, you know, move on with my life, if I was just playing this in my spare time, I'd probably do it on the next one up from easy, the one between easy and medium, and just enjoy the challenge a little bit more, go and do a few more of the side quests, and hopefully get a little bit more enjoyment out of the combat with that. That said, again, very much lacking in action. There's no dodging. There's no running away from enemies, really. I mean, you can outpace them if you're facing the opposite way, but you can't run backwards. You can't side strafe easily. You can't dash or dodge roll. So you're constantly just getting backed into a corner because you have to be facing the enemies to kill them, and the room sizes were relatively small. Some of the ones, sometimes you had a big room area to play with, but there was a lot of obstacles, a lot of things there, a lot of ways of getting trapped because you've got no jump. You've got no dodge, you've got no dash or strafe. So, and with the auto aim being useless, it just felt like I was constantly like slowly walking backwards through treacle with these things catching up to me and not doing enough damage unless I was on story mode, which then just made everything way too easy, and I didn't have to move about. I could just stand there and kill things without taking any damage, which was such a shame. I think the weapons themselves were great. They felt powerful. They had all the right noises and the right effects, and the dismemberment mechanic was great. The fact that this isn't a headshot game, one shot in the head and they're dead. You had to try and remove their arms and their legs to stop them from moving about, and I thought that was great. I think that's such a refreshing change for a game. But the problem was it was just the same old enemies every time, same old jump scares. It threw this unkillable enemy at you, sort of about a third of the way through the game, which you could only run away from, or you had to trap it. And then you've got these other mechanics. You've got a kinesis and a stasis mechanic where you can freeze things or you can pull things about and move them to you. But again, on story, it just felt completely pointless using those most of the time. It came in handy when you are backed into a corner and you're stuck because you can't push through the enemies. To put them into stasis, you can then just walk through them as if they weren't there, which was handy, but it felt like it wasn't really, it didn't seem to fit in properly. It didn't meld and gel together for me overall. So I think from that perspective, I don't think the combat's great. Again, I would have preferred a more action-packed style of combat where there's more dashing and dodging and running. And in that way, I don't mind the enemies being hard. I don't mind the enemies one-shot killing you if you've got an opportunity to get out of their way. But there's so many situations and points in this where you're in such close quarters with an enemy and you're literally stuck in a corner. You can't move left or right, or even if you can, you're on this sort of flooring that's going really slow, and you can't dodge out of the way of their stuff because there isn't a dodge button, or at least there isn't one that I found, which was a shame. So yeah, combat for me, not great. If you are really good at gaming, if you're a gamer, if you've got twitch reflexes, or you're just not terrible with the analog sticks like I am, then you're probably going to enjoy this a whole lot more. And I think I maybe have enjoyed it more if I was playing on PC and with a keyboard and mouse rather than using a controller, because obviously with a mouse I'm going to have better aim, I'm going to have better reflexes. But I don't like playing games like this with a keyboard and mouse. I enjoy just sitting back on a chair and using the controller and playing the game more disconnected, and I prefer it that way. So moving on from combat, the length of the game for me was around about 4 hours too long. I think the length was fine. The length was absolutely fine for the story, because the story was great and I could have listened to that story all day long. But with the repetitive nature of backtracking up and down the ship through the same areas over and over again, retracing your steps, opening lockers, opening chests, and then doing the same puzzles over and over and over again. After about 10 hours or so, you're just thinking, I just want to rush to the end of the story now and listen to this. At one point, I really got into the idea of let's do these side quests, because I was finding that side of it really engaging, the whole understanding what was going on and listening to the stories and the tapes and the things you find, the audio files. But then I just wanted to move on because I wanted to get to the end of it, and that's a shame, because one of the areas that I really liked, the story, my favorite part of this, I was cutting short to try and get to the end, just to get rid of this repetitive nature of the other things that you were doing. So that's a shame. So it's a little bit too long for the mechanics and the combat, but for the story it was perfect. Recommendations for anybody that's planning on playing this that hasn't already: definitely give it a go, because it's absolutely fantastic. It is a good game despite my moaning, but don't play on story mode. It's totally pointless. You might as well just watch someone else play it if you're going to play on story mode. Play it on easy if you're not very good, or even try the step between that and medium, or if you are good, maybe push yourself up to medium or even harder. I think medium was too hard. Like I say, if I was playing this again, I'd probably go on that stage between easy and medium, and just see how I got on with that, because I would like to fear the game a little bit more, but I know it would take twice as long to play because you would be constantly doing those things over and over again. With this being a game where it does have auto save to an extent, there are bits where if you have to restart something and you haven't gone to a save point, it will start you back at the beginning of that thing, which was great. It didn't do that all the time, but sometimes it did. The fact that you are using save stations, I think, is good and bad. It's really old style of gameplay, going to an area to have to save the game. It doesn't fit in with today's sort of modern ideals of I'm just picking this game up for 5 minutes and then I'm going to put it down again and do something else, and I'm going to play it on the train, or I'm going to play it on my way home, or it doesn't fit into that. But the save system is great for when you're making decisions. Although this wasn't a decision-making game. There was no, if you choose this, this will happen, or if you choose that, that will happen. But you are making decisions, and I imagine you'd make a lot more decisions than I was doing if you weren't playing on story, in terms of what am I going to do with my upgrades, because they were so scarce, because you hardly ever got anything to upgrade. You really did have to decide, do I need more ammo? Do I need to spend my money on that? Or is my gun powerful enough? Perhaps if I could upgrade my gun damage, I wouldn't need so much ammo. So there are decisions to make there. So having the save stations for that was a benefit. But I think most modern games don't have those, for that very reason, that games are best just when you can play them at your leisure. Pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down, and you couldn't do that with this, because the save points, some of them were right next to each other and some of them were half an hour in between. So yeah, there's that to contend with. So all in all, I would give this game a solid 7.5 out of 10 from my perspective, having played through it on the majority of it being in story mode. I think if I was a better gamer, if I was better at aiming, if I was better at doing these things, and if I wasn't recording a Let's Play and I was just playing it in my own time, I probably would give this game a little bit more because I think the horror aspect would have lasted longer and I think the combat system would have been more enjoyable. But as a person or as a player that's not the best at computer games, I think it's quite a bad game for beginners or, you know, people that are not great at playing this sort of game. Jeez, yeah, because it just like there's no point in the story mode. There's no point in it at all. If you, jeez. Oh man, I kind of want to do it again, but not on story. But then I just couldn't go through all of those. The same puzzles, the same things, the same corridors all over again. Anyway, that's my review. I hope you enjoyed the Let's Play. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.